Global Voices for Trust and Safety in the Digital Spaces at CSW. My name is Jyoti Vadera, and I'll be moderating your session today. Just a little bit of background on the work that we have done at CSR in the past decade. We've worked in the space of digital trust and safety for a long time on digital literacy, online safety programs, collaborations with global tech companies, policymakers, civil society, research projects, policy engagements, and a lot of work on misinformation, ethical AI governance, and deepfakes. Building on this work, last year we launched the Alliance for Cyber Trust and Safety, ACTS. This is India's first dedicated coalition for digital trust and safety. Our goal is to bring together civil society, industry, academia, policymakers, address digital safety challenges for the global maturity perspective, and also develop policy recommendation and capacity building programs. From ACTS, I have a support moderator today, Pranav Tiwari. So he will also be part of this conversation. Again, this year, we are bringing the Trust and Safety Festival to India in October of 2025 in collaboration with the Trust and Safety Forum. This festival has been a landmark event in Europe, convening both global leaders to tackle digital harms. Now we are hosting it in Delhi, and I would like to invite everyone present here for the festival to shape the voices of global majority and in policy discussions. Okay, coming back to the discussion today, I would like to introduce our distinguished panelists. We have with us Ms. Nighat, founder and executive director, Digital Lights Foundation, Pakistan. Welcome, Nighat. We have Kazim Rizvi, founding director of The Dialogue and part of the Secretariat of ACTS. We have Andrea Powell, Director of Policy and Development, Electro AI. We have Ms. Josephine, Political Affairs and Human Rights Diplomat, Embassy of the Kingdom of Netherlands in India. And we have our very own Dr. Ranjana, Director of Center for Social Research and Chairperson of ACTS. Welcome to all panelists. Thank you all of us for joining. I would request everyone who is not a speaker today to please switch off their cameras so that everyone can follow the discussion properly. Thank you so much. And without wasting too much time, I would just like to jump into the conversation already. Coming to you, Nighat, you had recently shared an important reflection on another convention about funding crisis hitting digital rights organizations, particularly in the global majority. Given this, how can digital rights organizations in the global majority build resilience among funding challenges, external exposure, and other challenges?
Yeah, thank you so much, Jyoti, for having me on this panel with other distinguished panelists. And thank you, Dr. Ranjana Kumari, for inviting me. Yeah, I mean, it's an important time to talk about resilience because digital rights organizations everywhere in the world, and especially in global majority, we all are facing immense funding cuts alongside political pressures and increasing restrictions on our civic space that has been going on for the last 1 decade. And I have been in this space for a long time, and I have seen how organizations working on issues like internet freedom and digital rights of free expression or online safety are often the first to be targeted, especially by the bad actors. But then now we are seeing, coming from the people who have supported this cause for so long. And many of us, when we started this work, we started with nothing. It was just a conviction and a mission in our minds. And but today, with shrinking resources and rising threats, we really need to rethink how we sustain our work and protect the communities that we work with. And I'm glad that you started this panel conversation with this question. I think it's also time for us to reflect that, one of the biggest risks for our organizations, and a kind of lesson learned in this funding cut globally that we are seeing, is that over-reliance on a single funding source when it comes from international, donors. And I guess now is the time that we need to explore alternative models, whether it's like your local philanthropies, or if we can sort of find ways to sell our own expertise to the stakeholders who are still interested in this work. I think the more independent we are financially, the stronger we can be against external pressures like the one that we are facing at the moment. And this is again the time that we really need to build more resilient networks and communities around us. No organization can survive alone. Solidarity is key for us at this moment. We need to strengthen regional and local alliances. We need to work across movements, whether it's feminist network, whether it's climate justice group, a labor rights activist. We all are impacted at this point. We have seen in Pakistan that when digital rights are framed as a cross-cutting issue, more people care and mobilize to protect them. We also really need to look into security and well-being of our organizations and ourselves. This work that we do comes with risks. It comes with legal threats. It comes with online attacks, burnout. And we really need to invest, in the safety and mental health of our teams, the way we invest in the communities. Most of the time, often we forget ourselves and we ignore ourselves. So what that means is it means that we are better, secured in terms of core support, but flexible work policies, long-term strategies for protection. I believe if we all are exhausted and if our people are exhausted and unsafe, our work suffers and our community suffers. And I think lastly, we really need to rethink advocacy in restricted spaces. We are seeing this right wing rising everywhere. Not only in our region, now it's in Europe, now it's coming from other parts of the world. Many governments are becoming hostile to the work that we do. So how do we continue to influence policy? We need to be smarter in how we engage, using informal networks, working with policymakers quietly when necessary, and leveraging international mechanism, the one that, for instance, Dr. Ranjana Kumari just participated in. And we should also be using creatively all the means where we can talk about the work that we do, for instance, the way we are doing right now. I know these are difficult times, but I also believe I also believe in the resilience of our movement. We have survived because we adapt, because we innovate, and because we refuse to be silenced. So we must continue to fight for the work that is closer to our heart. Thank you.
Beautifully said, Nighat. We pivot and we adapt, and if we work together, especially on informal networks, alliances like the ones we're all working on, and have solidarity, I think that's the key to surviving in this sector. Anyone who does work in this space can only understand this so well. Um, and now coming to you, Josephine. Hi.
Hi.
How would you like to add to what Nighat just said? And how can diplomatic efforts help align national regulations, global digital safety frameworks, and especially in the global south with vulnerable communities?
Thank you so much, Jyoti, for organizing the panel and for the question. It's really an honor to be part of this panel with such expert speakers. A small note, I'm maybe not quite as qualified as my fellow panelists on the topic of digital rights and governance, but I'm very excited to discuss this topic of great importance because it's also very important for the Netherlands digital governance. And in the Netherlands, we believe that digital technologies hold the potential to transform our societies, our economies, and the way we interact with the world. But with this promise comes also a great responsibility. And we must ensure that these technologies serve humanity and are governed by principles that reflect our shared values, and especially when it comes to respect for human rights. And I think there's an ongoing debate about the role of human rights in digital governance. And some argue that human rights may hinder innovation or are too rooted in Western values to be applied universally. And others worry that maybe considering human rights in AI governance could slow development, and particularly in the global south. And we recognize that countries in the global south face distinct challenges, and that makes their perspectives on digital governance even more important because they're shaped by their unique priorities. And we think that these international frameworks should be developed together with all regions, respecting their needs, but at the same time, they should really uphold principles that protect human dignity. And in this regard, a key initiative that exists is the Freedom Online Coalition. This coalition aims to bridge the gap between these national and international regulations, and the Netherlands has been a founding member. And for the past years and during our chairmanship, we've worked hard to expand the coalition to include more countries from the global south. So recently, countries like Ghana, Kenya, Cape Verde, and Colombia have joined. And enrich the coalition with valuable perspectives on cultural diversity within AI, independence from large tech organizations, data sovereignty, and inclusive digital infrastructure. And what we also noticed that through the Freedom Online Coalition, member states have been able to take a more proactive stance in UN negotiations. So it's these platforms, these coalitions like the Freedom Online Coalition that are essential as we move forward in shaping a more inclusive and human rights centered approach to digital governance. So in short, I think that's where the power of us diplomats come in, is that we can have this convening power of bringing countries and perspectives together, and that way we can move between national and international frameworks and make sure there are no gaps. Thank you, Jyoti.
That was quite educational for all of us, especially learning about the Freedom Online Coalition. I'm sure everyone agrees. And you're right, this is where all the diplomats come in. These efforts really, really matter to us. And we are very grateful for the support that we receive from the Netherlands Embassy. You guys have been front runners in the support in this mission for us in India, and I'm sure globally. And coming to you now, Kazim, since we both our speakers before you have spoken about coalitions and alliances, I would like to come in, like you to come in now as Secretariat of Acts, talk about that, and also talk about policy gaps in India that need urgent attention to balance digital security, free expression, innovation. Kazim, are you here?
Yeah. I hope I'm audible, Jyoti.
Yes, we can hear you.
Great. Thank you so much. And first of all, thank you for CSR for putting this together. I think very timely conversation, and we should continue to have such discussions, especially with speakers across the globe. I think just on your second point with respect to the policy gaps, and this is something which I've also been thinking about in terms of what are the policy gaps. I think globally as well as in India, I think we are seeing that there is a rise in misinformation. There is a rise with respect to harms on the internet, harms in the online space. And jurisdictions have been trying to grapple with this problem of regulation and at the same time preserving freedom of speech and expression. In most jurisdictions, including India, these freedoms come with certain riders and reasonable restrictions, which are subjective to how they are implemented and enforced by the state. So, there is always this continuous battle in terms of making sure that your regulations are such that you do not compromise on the freedoms, but at the same time, how do you make people safer on the internet? And we've been grappling with this issue for the longest time. We've seen in Europe that they have implemented something called the Digital Safety Act, which is now in
Yes.
place to regulate intermediaries. It's a great legislation to take inspiration from us. And also the UK's online safety bill, online safety act as well, is something which we've been following for the longest time. And one thing which has stood out to me, Jyoti, which I've seen and how the DSA is doing is, while they want to preserve safe harbor, which I believe is quintessential and is very, very critical to the survival of the internet and the growth of the internet, right? I mean, safe harbor is the most important piece which we all must fight to protect. And how the DSA has gone about protecting safe harbor so that it avoids or it doesn't really leads to censorship, but at the same time, they mandate platforms to have systemic processes in place, which will ensure that they are taking the right steps towards dealing with problematic content. And this is a debate which we've also been having in India now. And, we call it responsibility versus liability debate, right? What it says is that platforms have the responsibility to take action and they have the responsibility to sort of delete, take down content, illegal content. Obviously, depending on cultural sensitivities, Europe is much different to India when it comes to cultural sensitivities over there. Right to offend is a fundamental right. In India, that may not be the case. Right. So the freedom of speech works differently in different jurisdictions. But what is important is to make sure that you do not enable a liability framework where platforms start becoming arbiters of truth and platforms start dictating what is right and what is wrong and what is illegal, what is legal. It's not their job. You need the state to make sure that illegal content is taken down. But if something is harmful, that is a subjective decision for platforms to sort of remove or not to remove. So you don't want a liability framework where platforms are forced to censor, pre-censor content or take down content, and where the original content creators or people with ideas may not be able to share a public square or a public space where they may not be able to share ideas and have a conversation, an honest conversation or conversation where they want to share different thoughts. So you want to maintain safe harbor, but we've also seen that safe harbor was developed in the 1990s. We moved on 30 years from there onwards. There's a plethora of problematic content which is surfacing on the internet space. So we need systemic processes as well, where platform can ensure that, yes, we are taking the right steps forward. And this is something which DSA has done very effectively. And this is something which we believe is a gap to be met in India. We believe that the Indian regulation uh, rightly so protects safe harbor, and it should stay this way. While at the same time, the Indian lawmakers should enable and work with platforms to make sure that platforms have systemic processes, the right processes to deal with problematic content and take it down as and when required. I think that is an enforcement issue, not as much as a policy issue. We believe that enforcement of the existing laws has to improve in that sense. And also the accountability and the responsibility of platforms has to sort of go up a notch or two, but while maintaining the basics of the internet, which is safe harbor. To your first question on the acts, and I think this is something which, under the leadership of Dr. Kumari, we've initiated in the last year, where we thought, and all of us were brainstorming, that there is definitely a gap when it comes to a representation or a collective of NGOs, civil society, think tanks working in the online space. ACTS is the first and only coalition on India on internet safety, which is led by grassroots organizations who have a stake on online safety. And these are organizations like CSR, like the Dialogue, but also organizations who work with children, parents, different important stakeholders, who work on the ground and who have a fair understanding of what are the challenges when it comes to online safety and what do we need to do when it comes to making the internet a safer place. They work with survivors, they work with different players, different types of stakeholders. And the idea came through the research we've done over the last year, was looking at a whole of society approach to solving the problem of online safety, not just regulation, but also bringing in lawmakers, policymakers, parents, teachers, children as well, looking at issues around, research, looking at intervention, early stage intervention, law enforcement, and also making sure that the right policies are in place. So that's something which we've done at CSR in the dialogue, and this is a forum which will fight for safety and to make online spaces more safer. And this is something which we are quite proud of, and we look forward to engaging with all of you on this issue.
Thank you, Kazim, for talking about platform and regulation, and also, of course, acts. This is our favorite subject to talk about and promote. And now coming to you, Dr. Ranjana, can you talk about the gaps in our digital safety efforts, not just in India, but globally, how we can all work together on this, and how can coalitions and the networks that we've formed over the years, like acts, bridge them? Ma'am, please unmute yourself.
So thank you, Jyoti. I think it's very timely as there has been so much of talk about it in many, many platforms that of late I have been part of. Three things that I feel is very, very important to move in the direction. One, of course, we do not see much comprehensively discussed issues in between governments and platforms, governments and people, and then all the stakeholders coming together and trying to look at this issue is becoming. See, there is no getting out of it. It is going to be there. Tech is the future, and we do know that women are going to shape that future. So these two, tech is the future, and we women will kind of be in the front to shape it. That's my conviction, and I feel that in that sense we do need to sit across the table as communities, as governments, and as also the companies and corporate, companies to tech companies to come together. It is this, there is no, so far we are doing silos. We have trust and safety discussions together. We have seen governments in France. You saw that all governments came and they came up with declaration. There was very, very marginal little discussion about gender. I think Nighat was there, and we all know JC was there. We know that how little we discussed and how little space was given after a lot of fight. One room somewhere in the corner that we all were looking at the whole gender question. So there is going to be, so that's one big gap that I see, that is at the moment, and it can be only bridged when there is an initiative from the government side where we are listening to everybody. We are listening to the user side. Now, when I talk about the communities, there are people who are totally unprepared for being on the platforms, using the platforms. There is hardly any awareness. A larger community of people just jumped into it. There is this, like you own and you want to control the new technology, but you're not aware of the risk factors of that technology. You are not aware of the, almost it reminds me of when, very, very basic example I want to give you, but then the cutters for the village rural areas, when you were cutting the, say, sugar cane, and then so many people lost their limb because they didn't know how far they can put their hand inside. And so many such accidents happen in our part of the world. And when I hear a lot of you talking about global south, global majority, then I do see that there is a dire need to bring them in and to be able to do a lot more to create that education and awareness. Now, for education awareness, we are again looking at the platforms and tech companies to pitch in and to fund it. But it is basic responsibility of the governments to run such programs. So far, we haven't heard our governments to declare any kind of, they have so many different schemes, programs, projects to alleviate poverty, to go for education. But then to, the whole population today is, and we are saying whole of society approach. So the whole population is using the platforms, but we are not seeing any kind of such, step forward. And we do need to do a lot more advocacy than we are doing in our region, especially in Global South. We need to do and hold them accountable for making just like classroom education, this education is perhaps more important. I don't know, after 5 years, we will say, oh, we lost the plot because we were not aware and we were not adequately educated. So that's my third point. And my final point is that when we are looking at the guardrails, and we're looking at the laws, and Kazim talked about DSA, we do need to sit down as South Asia. We need to sit down regionally and look at what is possible, what we are doing. We need to share with each other much more on that. So there has to be much more global meets and regional meets on this issue to be able to share what kind of a legal framework is going to protect the users. And the user safety will have to be on the top of the mind, because whether it is bullying, whether it is all kinds of financial fraud that we are seeing. Also, one of the major science or you can say technology, science and technology institution in India, just day before yesterday was duped of 54 lakh rupees. I'm sure all of you read it in the newspaper. So, look at the way all this is spreading. And look at the way unprepared population has gone into it. I'm not talking about some of us who are smart enough to be getting hold of it and to be able to use it. So that's the third point. And fourth and final point is that we cannot. A lot of tech companies are shirking the responsibility of trust and safety. We are engaging in dialogue with a lot of them because of this festival that we want to host in October, on 7th and 8th October in India. But you see that a lot of them are shirking that responsibility. No more fact checkers. We don't need any of trust and safety forums and policy bodies, or we don't need any of these. So I think that's where also a serious, and especially since we also have someone representing Netherlands, Josephine is there, and I think global diplomatic community, when you are meeting in UN and other forums, G7, G20, all those forums, we do need to emphasize that, the companies need to take that responsibility. You cannot shirk it. You cannot get away from this. And that is extremely important to keep in mind. So I want to keep it short. I was here basically to listen to all of you, but let's move on with this conversation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ranjana. Nighat, so we've heard Dr. Ranjana talk about holding governments responsible. We've also heard her talk about holding platforms responsible, which was a similar view that Kazim had shared. Support of the global diplomacy that Josephine spoke about. We're all talking about a lot of different aspects of how we can enable digital trust and safety, how we can all work together in the global majority. Now, I would also like to bring in to the conversation AI moderation, which is another aspect of the whole current situation that we're all facing. How can we prevent AI moderation from disproportionately censoring women and marginalized voices? That's a very important topic that we need to talk about, especially in forums like these.
Yeah, no, I think, of course, like when you're talking about digital rights, you cannot get away without talking AI, not just opportunities and that the harms that come with the AI innovation, but also the governance side of things. But just to respond to what our previous speaker said about the state role around regulating platforms, and I think some regions have set really good precedent in terms of Digital Services Act in the EU, and we are looking very closely, watching the enforcement in terms of how they regulate these platforms, and the risk assessment that has just come out. I think there are like so many things to watch from these jurisdictions. But I also would like to say that the not all regulations coming from different jurisdictions have the same intention to regulate platforms. I think we just need to be very, very cautious in siding with this argument around that it's the state's role to hold platforms accountable. Definitely it's state's role, but at the same time, I think we have to be cautious of the previous legislations that have been enacted by the by many governments around the world, especially authoritarians. But then those governments were in the name of protecting young women and girls against harassment or holding platforms accountable. But at the same time, we have seen how those laws were used and still are being used to suppress free speech or voices of journalists or activists. Now, coming to your question, we by now we all have seen that AI systems often lack the nuanced understanding which is required to interpret context, especially in diverse cultural settings, or when we talk about global majority. And this deficiency leads to the misinterpretation of content from marginalized groups, resulting in unjust censorship. What we have been asking to platforms, even before this whole conversation around AI, that platforms must be transparent about their policies or implementation of their policies. But how now their AI moderation system function? Not many of us have an insight into that. So what this transparency includes is the disclosing of the data sets that are being used for training, and the specific criteria for content removal. And I guess this openness that we require from these companies, or transparency from these companies, allow us or external stakeholders to audit these platforms and hold them accountable once they have enough information to hold them accountable. And I think it's very important that we really need to see the cycle of AI design, the deployment, and who is doing that, who are the people doing all of this, whether the marginalized communities are included in this AI development. And I think it's important to see the people in the north who are mainly doing these jobs, are they including voices from marginalized communities in the development and oversight of AI moderation tools? And then I guess robust appeal mechanisms are needed, and their implementation is needed. So users should have access to clear and efficient appeal processes when their content is removed, for instance, which will ensure that those who feel wronged by AI decisions can seek redress. And I think this can only happen when platforms are open, that how they are using AI for content moderation. And last but not the least, we cannot use AI for everything. It's not the solution for everything. The way we are listening from all the conversation happening around the world, and governments are in this AI race around, development of AI, but also, trying to position themselves the best market where people can invest or companies can invest. But you cannot do this without the human loop. And while AI can handle large volumes of content, I believe human moderators are very essential for understanding context and cultural sensitivities. And I think that a hybrid approach is a way to go, where AI flags content and human moderators can make final decisions. And I think this can mitigate the unjust censorship that we are talking about here.
I think that's the right way to go, where we do use AI for moderation, but the ultimate decision making should lie with the humans, because human aspects, especially in countries like India and Pakistan, where the cultural context is so nuanced, we need human intervention here in these cases. Yeah, so adding on to what you already said, Nighat, I would like to talk to Josephine. Josephine, so we've spoken about regulations in globally, like the DSA, and holding platforms responsible. But what do you think governments and how can global bodies collaborate to develop AI regulations that prioritize fairness, accountability, human rights? Yeah.
Thank you so much, Jyoti, for the question. In our view, we must approach the challenges of digital governance with openness and with humility. Human rights, in our view, are not a Western concept. They are universal principles that ensure dignity, fairness, and justice for all. And they should not be seen as barriers to innovation, but actually as safeguards that make sure that the technology uplifts humanity rather than it divides us, as it sometimes tends to do. And I think the Netherlands, like other countries, has not been immune to the challenges of upholding these values in the digital age. In fact, we have made mistakes, and we have a very painful example, which is the tax fraud scandal. And in this scandal, in this case, biased algorithms were used in ways that unfairly targeted vulnerable citizens with devastating consequences. And I think this tax fraud scandal also revealed the risk of deploying AI without sufficient safeguards, but also made it very clear that there is actually a big human impact and a human cost to such errors of AI, or not rightly regulated AI. And I think for now we have learned from this experience. We have taken significant steps in the Netherlands to improve AI governance. So we've implemented an algorithm registry to increase transparency. And we require now impact assessments for AI systems. And both these measures
Sorry, I think someone turned
No
on.
worries.
Yeah, please.
No, both these measures ensure that bias and discrimination are carefully considered before deployment and reflect, I think, also the Dutch commitment to responsible AI use. And we're definitely not alone in this journey. I think the European Union has already been mentioned by one of the panelists. There's also the European Union's AI Act, which provides quite a robust regulatory framework that ensures that AI respects fundamental rights and values. And I think more importantly, last year, the Council of Europe adopted a treaty on AI, which also lays the foundation for international cooperation on AI governance with a human rights-centered approach. And I think it's also important to highlight the work of the UN high-level advisory body on AI. The Netherlands has been supporting this body both financially as well as through advocacy on human rights-based principles. And they have recently published recommendations on AI governance on the multilateral level. And we fully support these human rights-based approach in the recommendations, and we will continue to advocate for them in international discussions. And we actually think that the UN also has a key role to play in shaping AI governance globally. I mean, the UN is rooted in universal principles, has great reach, and has the authority to convene nations on critical issues. And we believe that AI is such an issue at this time. And I think one of them, I think it was Ursula von der Leyen who had the president of the EU Commission, who had a suggestion of developing something like the IPCC, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, but then for AI. And I don't think there are any perfect templates at the moment, but what the IPCC did successfully is sort of synthesizing all the research and fostering a global consensus. And I think that could be a model that is promising maybe for AI governance. Maybe this can be the way forward as we work together and make sure that AI serves in everybody's interests, and especially in the interest of the most vulnerable groups. So I leave it at that.
Yes, Nighat, you wanted to add something?
Yeah, I just wanted to say thank you, Josephine. I've been part of the high-level advisory body of UN Secretary General on AI, and two recommendations. So we gave 7 recommendations, and thanks to Netherlands government for supporting, especially the human rights chunk of it, because I was the one who was leading it in the panel. But we gave 7 recommendations, and 2 of the recommendations became part of Global Digital Compact after states negotiated on those recommendations. And so one is establishing global AI governance dialogue, especially on the lines of IGF or IPCC. They are looking into the models at the moment. And the second one is having a scientific panel on AI. So I think there were some consultations that 2 co-facilitators conducted, Costa Rica and Spain, and we'll see findings of those consultations very soon.
Thank you for telling us that, Nighat. We'll definitely keep an eye out for that. And I also hope that you would also keep us updated on the efforts that are being made in this space. And now, Kazim, can you now add to what Josephine and Nighat have already spoken about, and also talk about how India and other developing nations influence AI governance frameworks, and add to what they've already said?
Thank you, Jyoti. I think so. At the end of the day, what we need is responsible AI deployment. And towards this, OECD has done a lot of work on responsible AI principles, which are also something which have found their way into India's subcommittee report by the Ministry of IT, which was published in January. And they speak about, different types of responsibilities, such as, transparency, privacy, security, etc., which are sort of inbuilt into this transparency, of course. And we also suggested that explainability and sustainability should be added as priority areas through our submission to the committee report. So the government of India and India stakeholders are already looking into responsible AI adoption. Some of India's leading tech companies like Infosys have come up with open source responsible AI toolkits as well for companies to adopt. So while the government has a job to do when it comes to making sure regulation is introduced, I think before regulation, what we need is some sort of a collective thinking and taxonomy on responsible AI principles. Number one, once you agree on what kind of principles we want to work towards, then we need to move towards some sort of codes of conduct for companies to start implementing these principles into practice. And I think that's something very critical before we, jump to conclusions with regulation. Here, I believe the EU AI Act has jumped the gun, and I believe that it's too early to sort of differentiate between different types of risk and regulate AI from a omnibus perspective, which I do not think is the right approach. Thankfully, India is not taking that approach. So I think it's going to cause a lot of damage. AI, from our point of view, I think when we look at it, there is a lot of potential. But at the same time, intersection research needs to do in terms of the impact it will have on labor. I think that's an area where not much research and conversations are happening. And with the rise of agentic AI, there is definitely a need for stakeholders and civil society to conduct research on the intersection of labor and AI and how it could impact. We are already seeing in the legal space, AI is able to replace some jobs, and we are going to see this happen over different sectors, including science. We are hearing, that tomorrow you can have agentic AI, which could be at the level of a PhD scholar. Now, that is something which needs to be studied, in my opinion, in terms of the impact it will have on white and blue collar jobs. Right. Obviously, I'm an optimist, so I believe that AI should create a lot more jobs. But at the same time, we cannot understate the importance of human in the loop. And I do not think that autonomous AI applications are anywhere near ready, which is where I feel that there's a lot of work to be done, is that the human in the loop aspect should be continued and it should stay as it is. So labor is an area of importance. Indian regulators are studying different intersections. Our competition regulator is studying the competition harms associated with AI ecosystems and the AI supply chain, where there is perceived market concentration. And that is something which the Competition Commission of India is already looking into, which is very much needed at this stage. And then, of course, there is a committee which is looking into the financial services and AI applications as well. So at this stage, I would say we need to spend some time on evidence gathering. I'm a big proponent of progressive regulation, but I I I am not trigger happy with regulation unless there is evidence to support. We cannot have regulations based on sentiments and emotions. We have to be pragmatic. We have to make regulations from the mind, not from the heart. Therefore, only when you have clear evidence of harm should you come and regulate, because regulation is needed when there is a clear problem to be solved. There is a market failure, you're trying to solve for a market failure. So we need to stick to first principles when it comes to regulation. Just because we see certain problems to be perceived and we talk within ourselves and within different types of groups and closed conversations, we love to advocate for regulation. But I think, we've seen this in India, that evidence-based regulations work better than regulations without any evidence. And then you end up, counterproductive. You end up causing a lot of problems and damage. So I think it's important to study the harms associated with AI content or AI moderation, and clear numbers are needed. Unless you have those, you should not proceed with regulation, because I think there is a clear economic value to be capitalized, at least in India. I mean, we have 250 plus Gen AI startups which are exporting services from India to the rest of the world. And we have huge potential. We are already working on an LLM, an Indian large language model, which should come out hopefully early next year or quite soon. We are already third in terms of the research we have published globally on AI. So there is a strong economic angle. So I am all in favor of regulation which protects and supports industry as well, right? I think that is also needed. And but at the same time, if we say, okay, there's a lot of content issues and let's regulate it, without any evidence, without numbers, it'll end up causing more harms than it'll, cause. It'll, make it better. So yes, AI systems have to be studied from a labor point of view, from a competition point of view. It has to be studied from a fintech point of view. Conversations are happening whether AI tools, are they publishers, are they intermediaries, or what are they? So I think there's a need to study the ecosystem, and that's what we are trying to do also, is trying to study these issues. There's a very strong intersection with copyright and AI as well, which is something which is already also being discussed. So once we have those ideas in place, then I think it makes a lot more easier to say, okay, how should we regulate AI? And I believe that the AI safety conversation, which started last year, and multiple countries came up with their own safety institutes. I don't know where that conversation is right now with the Trump administration kicking in, and the focus has shifted from safety to national security. But I do believe that it's critical that India and the leaders of Global South, in India needs to be part of these international safety conversations. I do not think multilateral bodies like the UN's will be able to do much. I honestly believe that the time of UN is over. Uh, More bilateral G7 level, G20 level conversations will dictate how AI governance frameworks will be developed. Already happening. OECD and other jurisdictions are taking a call. So UN is great, but it's not effective. And that's a position. And even Honorable Finance Minister Jaishankar has spoken about at Raisina Dialogue about UN. So we love UN, but I think there are other forums to be looked into. The International Safety Institute on AI, in fact, is the forum for AI safety. It is also developing technical standards for AI, right? And that is where the conversation is picked up. So if I were to be pragmatic, I would try to make sure that INASI is the capacity is built, and there is more momentum on the INASI level, where eventually technical alignments will come in. And I think that's where the goal, the shift is going to be. So it's important for Global South to be part of these conversations. And I think we have to force our way into these conversations. But at the same time, when it comes to standards, it is critical for standards to be interoperable. It is important that all jurisdictions are heard. Obviously, India being an important player with the economic value which we are generating, I think it's you cannot ignore India in terms of these conversations going forward.
Definitely, that's yeah, you touched upon a lot of important aspects. Nighat, I see you want to come in over here.
Yeah, I know. I just wanted to respond to this statement around that UN doesn't have a lot of value here. I think a UN actually brings a lot of value, especially around AI, conversations around AI global governance, because it's the only place where all states will have a seat on table. Right now, what we see is some governments shaping up this conversation. Global North is taking the lead in this conversation. There is this AI safety summit race is going on, and I think the only space where global majority countries, be it in our region or other regions, will only have a space in the UN where they can negotiate with other powerful governments who are actually calling the shots. So definitely UN is very much needed, especially during these conversations when emerging tech and AI global governance conversation is on the rise.
Yes, Nighat, I think India is asking for a seat in the UN, as you all know. So I'm sure we are building a different level of pressure. And Kazim has a view. And as we know, we have a very important Raisina dialogues going on. And I also, but there is a step ahead. There is also a higher level of discussion going on about even quantum, like things are moving in a very different and very high level direction at the moment. So we have to see. I mean, we have to see where these agencies move and how everybody, as you all the time, you Nighat, mentioned about global majority, global south, and how where do we have really the voice? I mean, do we really have the voice, or we are still trying to make our space to be heard? And especially in this context, the context and of course this definitely calls for a next level of our online dialogue. We should bring in all these naysayers and yesayers to be together, and let's have the conversation. Okay, Jyoti, over to you.
Yeah.
I don't know whether Andrea is here. Jyoti, are you?
No, Andrea couldn't join us today, but Josephine has her hand raised. She would like to add to this discussion.
Yeah, I just want to point out that I found it a little bit contradictory in saying that all jurisdictions should be heard, but then if we use platforms like the G20 or G7, they're so limited in the number of countries that are actually at the table. And I agree that the UN has problems, but I do think it's the best that we have right now to work with, because it is, as Nighat said, the only place where every member state can be at the table, and it is so important that we include all narratives in the development of these frameworks. And right now, I think the UN is then the body that we have to work with.
That's the only body we have at the moment. That's what you mean, Josephine, no? Just when we don't have any other alternative body where everybody is represented. But 1.5 billion people certainly need a seat now. So that's the fight. Okay, so Jyoti, next one. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I was actually going to come to you now to talk about, what impact you envision coalitions that we are now running, like ACTS or the festival that we are trying to bring to India, and how it will shape the digital governments over the next 5 years.
Yes, well, I want to be very ambitious as far as this whole effort of ours is concerned, because X initiative and Trust and Safety Festival together have the potential to drive significant global impact on digital governance over the next few years, 5 years at least. That's what I feel. So we in the festival can set a global standard for digital trust and safety. It's very, very important. It's very timely, the festival, and we will have to make that effort. So acts can shape the international, agenda for trust and safety. We also have to build more and more global coalitions, because at the moment we feel a little bit more isolated because we are not part of the global. And as we keep saying, oh, something is happening in San Francisco, something in Paris, something in London, but we need to bring it something in Karachi, we need to bring it something in Islamabad or Delhi, or for that matter, Dhaka, and all our region, so that we everybody is hearing the same thing and are able to participate. So reaching out and building it, but that's our responsibility too. We can't just raise our finger and say, hey, you are not listening to us, but we do need to bring everybody here to understand what's going on. And a lot of things that they are thinking about, we have already seen, we have already experienced, and we have already found some solutions for it. So we do need to share that and reach out. So that's the second thing. And third, I feel that this will be our best opportunity, especially the festival, because as our team, including JC and Caroline and you all, we are thinking of giving space to everyone. If you want to have a panel of your own, it's just like a mela where everybody will have their own small kiosk or a shop where you can talk about what you would like to talk about. But eventually, all that go into the final declaration that we will come up with. That's the other role. And the third, which is very within the countries that I feel acts is filling the gap of bringing all the players together in the civil society space. So we do have lots of organizations who are joining us and who have already joined us with all your efforts. So their voices are coming and their experiences can be then put together, and we use it as an advocacy for for the national level advocacy that we are time to time invited for, to give our opinion on at different level. So I think this is something which we can do, and I'm so looking forward to all of you joining in the Trust and Safety Festival. And I'm so looking forward to, if you have any connects. So that's my, in a way, a kind of ask from all of us, is that if you are connected and you feel that someone will play a very important role in this whole, first of all, building towards it. That means getting more and more people interested, getting more and more people support, getting more tech companies to come with us. If that's possible, please let us know, give us the lead. And we are reaching out, and we are working with lots of them. Even during the UN meeting, I have managed to get a lot of response. So so that's the final one. I mean, I would say, and that certainly should give us some time to question answer. So I close here. Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Thanks for partly doing my job also for initiating us for the festival. This was very interesting. One of the most interesting panels that I've moderated. So everyone does not have to agree with each other, but it's important that we're passionate towards making a difference. That is the whole point of of discussions like this. We are exactly at 6:59. I was hoping we would have some more time for questions, but what I'm going to do is, we've chosen questions that audience have shared with us. We will email them to you, and we are going to ask for their questions back. As soon as we have answers from the panelists, we are going to share them with the audience. We have all their contact information, and that we'll share in our report. Yeah, we're at time, and I would just like to thank everyone for making this very, very crucial discussion so interesting. We have a lot that we took back from this. We've spoken about a lot of aspects that we all need to work together on. AI and digital safety collaborations all across the globe, the voice of the global majority that we need to strengthen, bias-free AI, and how we need to hold governments as well as platforms responsible, and not just talk about it now. Finally, we've been talking about it for so long, but take action. And which is why, again, I would like to end it by saying we look forward to hosting all of you at the festival. This discussion needs to continue in a lot of specifics as well. Thank you so much to all the panelists, audience, everyone who has. We still have so much engagement in our question and answer in the chat box. Thank you, everyone, everyone who joined us today. And Josephine, Nighat, Kazim, Dr. Ranjana,